Okay, hello everyone. I know we're going to get started with the presentation in just a moment. I just wanted to take a few seconds here to kind of walk through some items with you as people continue to join. First of all, I want to say welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Geraldine Weiser, and I'm the Director of Business Development here at Corporate College. And I definitely want to welcome you to today's very wonderful session on Lean Six Sigma. Though as we wait for the presentation to start, I just wanted to remind everyone that today's session, a copy of that presentation will be emailed to you along with our survey. So we really look for your truly valuable feedback later on. Again, as another reminder, if you haven't already, please use this moment now to do an audio check on your computer or mobile device. Please check and adjust if necessary your audio settings, your volume control, and make sure that you can hear me fine. Just as a reminder too, I want you to know that everyone who's entering the webinar is muted. However, we really look forward to hearing from you through the chat box. So, and even though your chat messages will not be visible to all the attendees, it'll be visible to myself, our co-panelist, Dawn, and our presenter, Jim Odom. Jim will be responding to as many of those comments and questions throughout the presentation as possible, and we'll address them at the end and have a Q&A session as well. So I want you to be ready to chat. We definitely want your participation. So in order to do that, to send messages, please look at your chat box. Please use the chat instead of the Q&A box, and look for the arrow, make sure it's pointing down so it's expanded the chat box and you're able to type in your messages. And you can see the to address box. Make sure that's in that drop down arrow, it's selected to all panelists. And that way Dawn, myself, and Jim will be able to monitor that. Okay. So with that, I think we're going to get ready. So officially, thank you and good afternoon, everyone. We really appreciate you joining Corporate College's webinar series, Live with the Experts. We look forward to providing really relevant information and tools, topics to support you and really set you up for success. We find really every single day that many businesses are shifting to this new norm, this new reality of working remotely and learning remotely. And at Tri-C, we understand that. And so we're committed to serving you in this time of rapid change by providing actionable resources to help you and your team not only succeed, but thrive wherever your team is located, whether they're still on the work site or they are remote. Our webinar series is one of Corporate College's newest resources to prepare the workforce to overcome challenges and achieve both personal and business goals. Our series consists of 4 themes, with today's really focusing on how you do what you do by working remotely. Other session topics focus on virtual leadership, navigating a transition, even personal health and well-being. And as many of you know, Corporate College is a very distinguished and talented team of facilitators and subject matter experts. And so today I'm so pleased to introduce our presenter and facilitation specialist, Jim Odom. Jim and I have had the good fortune of working together for a while, but to give you a little bit of his background, he was employed by Delphi Packard Electric Systems for 30 years prior to launching his own consulting practice. And for Corporate College, he has taught so many different programs for us, the ASQ certification, process improvement, Lean Six Sigma, yellow, green, black belt classes. He's taught them all. And Jim is a past education chairperson, treasurer for the American Society for Quality, or ASQ, the section in Youngstown, Ohio. So very, very distinguished career. And with that, I'm very pleased to present to you Jim Odom. Hey, Jim, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing great, Jerry. Thank you very much for the introduction. And welcome everybody this afternoon to our session on what is Lean Six Sigma. I'm going to start by telling you we're going to have some questions that we're going to be asking throughout. One of the first ones that I'd like you to think about is, or to answer is, does your organization currently use Lean Six Sigma, either Lean by itself or Six Sigma by itself? So if you want to use your chat box, and you can go ahead and start to let us know. Jerry's going to try to gather that, and we'll give you the results of that in a little bit. I'll have some other questions as we go through, but if you can go ahead and answer that one, that would be great. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about Lean and what it is and what it can do for you. You know, Lean is all about making our processes more efficient. We're going to talk about the 8 waste, which is something that we use an acronym called Tim Woods. And those are our different sources of waste, what the Japanese call muda, M-U-D-A, another term for waste. We'll talk about the 5 Lean principles. I'll also talk about Kaizen events and a process called Plan, Do, Check, Act. Kaizen and PDCA, or Plan, Do, Check, Act, are the improvement processes that we use in Lean to make improvements. Then we're going to switch gears, and we're going to move on to the Six Sigma side of the house. You know, Lean is all about identifying and eliminating waste, making our processes more efficient. But then on the Six Sigma side of the house, it's all about reducing and eliminating variation. And variation is our enemy. So we're going to be talking about what causes variation in our processes, something that's known as the 6 M's. And I'll talk more about that when we get to that part of the presentation.
So Jim, let me just say, you've got quite a few people responding already. However, it really seems for the most part that we have a larger part of the audience who either knows or believes that their organization does not have a Lean Six Sigma process.
Okay. Well, I think then this will be very beneficial then to at least give you some idea of what this whole process is all about. So we're gonna then cover the Lean or the improvement process for Six Sigma, which is called DMAIC. It's a 5-step process. It stands for Define, Measure, Analyze, Improve, and Control. So we'll go through that, and then we're going to get into the benefits of Lean Six Sigma, how they work together to make huge improvements. We'll go then to the different levels of certification. In Lean Six Sigma, there are yellow belts, green belts, black belts, and master black belts. I'll talk a little bit about that. And then at the end, we're going to talk about some keys to success. So with that, Jerry, why don't we go back to the second slide, which is the one that's titled Lean. I think it's the one just before this. That's it. All right, like I said, Lean is all about making our processes more efficient. Customers want consistency. They want to make sure that our processes add value, that we provide the best quality that we can with this little waste. And there's an old saying that's out there that says, we need to work smarter, not harder. So that's what Lean does for you. It really helps you to think about how we can make this process work better with less waste and to be more value added for our customer. So one of the things that we really concentrate on the Lean side is looking at what's called Tim Woods. And Tim Woods are the 8 different forms of waste that we have. The first one is transportation. Transportation is movement of material. It's the movement of raw materials, finished goods, work in process from one location to another within your facility, or as you send it on then to your customer. So that's transportation. The next waste is inventory. And inventory can be raw material. It could be a work in process. It could be finished goods. It could be spare parts that you have for your equipment. And then also it could be the office supplies that, a lot of people have stashes of different office supplies in their desk or in their file cabinets. So that's inventory. The next one we look at and focus on is motion. And motion differs from transportation because motion is motion of people. It's people looking for things that they need in order to do their job. You know, um, it's that person running back and forth to get what they need from their workbench. So that's the motion. Waiting is something I think, you know, is one of my biggest pet peeves. And waiting is all about, you know, waiting to be told what to do, waiting uh, to get material, waiting for a phone call, an email, whatever it might be. You know, a lot of us are spent even waiting on meetings to start up. So waiting is a big waste for everybody. Next one is overproduction, and overproduction is something that's you know, you're producing more than what your customer needs or more than what your customer wants at that particular time. Overproduction is known as probably one of the worst wastes because it also then increases inventory and it increases the transportation of that material throughout the facility. Overprocessing. Overprocessing is giving your customer more than what they need or more than what they want from the standpoint of you're giving it to them basically for free. And when I talk about overprocessing, I think a good example is when you have extra packaging so that the product doesn't get damaged in shipment. A lot of cases we go overboard, and that's a total waste from the standpoint that, you know, customers a lot of times have to throw that extra packaging away. Defects, these are the different mistakes, errors, scrap that we produce in making our products or services. It's the things, it's the rework that you have to do, and that's a waste also. If you back up there, Jerry, I got one more, and then that's the safety and skill utilization. You know, we need to provide safe work environments for our employees. We don't want lost time accidents. And we need to make sure that we're utilizing the skills and resources of our people and our equipment. Okay, if you go to the next slide.
Well, so Jim, those are really great points, and I apologize for advancing by mistake. But we had, I do want to bring up one quick question. So those are all really great examples. Someone was asking, though, you know, how do we apply these lean principles, and what would you look for when you work in, say, maybe a nonprofit environment or a church environment or things like that, a service industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, I've got some real recent experience using Lean and Six Sigma in a church environment. Uh, there was a young fellow that just did a project. He was unemployed, so he's on his church council, and he volunteered to help them look at utility expense at their church. And he went through and looked at you know, the from electrical, from a water, from the different utilities that they utilize, and they found out different ways that they could save money. And you know, it's sort of the name of the game anymore, is to think about how you can save money and reduce expenses. So that worked out real well. A lot of nonprofits are doing the same thing. You know, Lean Six Sigma is being used, deployed throughout the world. And there are many companies, small, medium, and large, that are involved in this, in making these improvements. And it's really an organizational improvement process that you can use to improve your products, your services, and the processes. So anywhere that there's waste or variation, because we all know that customers like consistency. And so it's got applications throughout, and a lot of organizations are getting the benefits of Lean Six Sigma.
Right. And Jim, I know we're one of them too. You even helped us here at corporate college as well. So
Yeah.
great. So thank you for that answer.
All right,
Okay.
great. All right, so in the lean process, we use two different improvement processes. One is called a Kaizen event, and a Kaizen event is looking at small improvements that you can make to add more value to your process or your product or service. And so, it's a Kaizen means quick change. So we're not looking for huge improvements. We're looking for those small bunts, singles that you can make on a daily basis. We're not looking for home runs. So within that Kaizen event, what we use another process called Plan, Do, Check, Act (PDCA). And Plan, Do, Check, Act is basically you plan an activity, you do it, you check to see the results that you get from doing that activity, and then you act appropriately. You either go ahead and implement that change permanently, or you look to see if there's some modification that you need to make in order to make it work even better. So those are the two basic improvement activities for the lean process. We'll talk about a different process when we get to the Six Sigma side. Okay, within the lean process, there are 5 principles, and it doesn't matter who you read. There were some fellows that came out early. Jim Womack was one of them. And he talked about these 5 lean principles. The first one is defining value. Value is defined as basically what is your customer willing to pay for? And really what we want to provide to those customers are the value added activities. We also look at value from the standpoint of non-value add. And non-value add are those 8 wastes that we talked about, the Tim Woods that occur. And then many of you are involved in processes. Back up there, Jerry. Many of you are involved in processes where you have to, or you're government regulated. Either you're regulated by some outside agency, maybe there's state regulations or county or city regulations that you need to comply with. But those are non-value added activities. Customers really don't care about all the regulations that you have to comply to. What they're really concerned about is the value that they get from that product or service you provide. The next lean principle is mapping the value stream. The value stream is considered from the time that your customer either requires a product or service until you get paid for that product or service. It's all those different steps from the beginning until you actually receive your money for that. And really what you want to do is, like the next step talks about creating flow. You don't want any hang-ups. You want to make sure that that process flows as quickly and evenly as possible from one step to the next. So we create flow. And one of the tools that we look at in creating flow is to continually reduce the batch size that we get involved in. The next principle, the 4th principle, is developing pull. And pull is basically requesting from the previous operation the material that you need for the subsequent operations. So you're pulling material through the process, and you're only making what your customer wants at any one time. You're not building ahead, and hopefully you're able to develop and create that flow and develop that pull across all your different operations. And then the last one is continuously improving. And it's going back and looking at how you can provide more value, how you can take more waste out of the process, how you can better create flow and pull And so you're continuously trying to improve that process every day. So that's the 5 lean principles. Jerry, if you want to go to the next slide. I'm going to give you just a quick example of a lean Kaizen event that I was involved in just several years ago. I was working with another consultant, and we were doing a dog and pony show for a prospective client. And in the middle of our presentation, the owner jumped up and he says, "I've had enough." He says, "I'm ready to get started. When and where can we get started?" And his particular business was a printing operation. He prints most of the labels that are used by Amazon. And you can imagine that's a very high volume business. And his operation starts up on Sunday night, and they finish up. It's a 3-shift operation, except for Saturday and Sunday. He finishes up on Saturday morning. So I told him, I said, "Let me come in on Saturday or Sunday night when they start up, and I'll take a look at the process, and I'll give you my recommendation as to where we could get started." So I came in on Sunday night. I introduced myself to the supervisor and several different operators, and I was watching the process. And as I was watching it, the first machine started up at about 10 after 11. The next machine started up at 11:10 or 11:20. The next one at 11:30. About every 10 or 15 minutes, a new machine or a different machine would start up and run. And he had 13 machines, and it wasn't until probably after 2 o'clock or so that the final machine got up and running. So I found the supervisor again, and I said, "Hey, there's something here I don't understand. Is why are these machines starting up about every 10 or 15 minutes after each other?" He said, "Well, every operator has to grease their machine before they can start running." And he said, "We only have one grease gun." Well, they were in the process of passing that grease gun from one operator to the next so that they could grease their machine. And you can imagine how much waste there was involved in just passing that grease gun around. And the biggest waste is those machines weren't running until they were greased and ready to go. So you had all that downtime. The next morning, that fella came in, the owner came in, and I said, "Well, I got our first improvement opportunity." I said, "You need to get more grease guns for this place." So he had somebody run out. He's had 13 machines. He bought 12 more grease guns for less than $500, and they were well on their way to making huge improvements. So a little example. Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Now we're going to be talking about Six Sigma. And Six Sigma, on the other hand, focuses on removing variation in a process. Lean was all about identifying and eliminating waste. And really, from a Six Sigma standpoint, you're trying to reduce variation. And as I said earlier, variation is considered the enemy in our process. Well, what causes all this variation? It's something called the 6 M's. And the first M, and one of the biggest M's, is people. People create variation. And that's the man in the 6 M's. Everybody has their own slightly different way of doing things. And so people contribute a lot to variation in processes. Equipment, machinery or equipment cause variation. You've got some machines that run well, other machines that don't run well. Differences in material, differences in suppliers. You can even have differences in one lot of material to the next lot of material. The method, how we do things. Is our method standardized? Can you imagine if we didn't have a method or a recipe for baking a cake or baking a batch of cookies? What if you didn't have that? And a recipe is basically a method. You could have a lot of variation in the way those cookies and cake taste based on the different methods that might be used. how we measure things. In baking that cake or making those cookies, do we use a level scoop of sugar, or do we heap it up? Do we use half teaspoons, 3/4 teaspoons, or a full teaspoon? So measurement is important. And then, of course, Mother Nature affects processes quite a bit. And Mother Nature can be not only the weather, but could also be the environment within the facility that is producing the products or services. So variation caused by the 6 M's: man, machine, material, method, Mother Nature, and measurement. Okay, like I said, customers like consistency, and most of the time, customers know what they want. For the most part, when you go to your favorite restaurant, why do you go there? Because that restaurant gives you what you want, either from a quality standpoint, from a speed standpoint. You can go to a fast food restaurant, or you can go to a place that you sit down and have maybe a little bit better meal. And then, of course, to most people, cost. We call these wants of the customer the CTXs. Sometimes we just use the quality version of that and call them a CTQ, but it's what our customer is really paying for. As I said earlier, there's a 5-step improvement process that we use called DMAIC. And the first one is to basically define the problem. We want to define the problem and establish a metric so that we know if the process is improving as we go through this DMAIC improvement process. So we define it, define the issue or the problem, and establish a metric. In the measure phase, we start to collect data. We want to know, we want to establish a baseline. Where are we at today for this process? The next step is to analyze the data that we get in order to determine the root cause of the problem. From then we go into the improve phase once we understand what the root cause is, and then basically look at what are the potential solutions that would improve this root cause and eliminate our problem. We want these solutions to be efficient and effective, and also to be low cost. And then the 5th step of the process of DMAIC is what's called control. And in the control phase, what are the different controls that we need to put in place so that this problem never reoccurs? So we go through define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. And that is the 5-step process that we use for Six Sigma. Sometimes we incorporate Kaizen events inside of this DMAIC process. Sometimes we can even utilize plan, do, check, act. But those 3 work together for Lean Six Sigma to make all the improvements that we want to make.
Hey, Jim, that's really, really helpful. And I think that's great. Establishes a good foundation. I have a couple quick questions for you. There's a couple people asking, if you could define, what does the CTX stand for first?
Yeah, CTX is critical to something. And the X is just sort of an undefined, it could be quality. In most cases, most customers want quality products and services. They want that product or service delivered when they need it, and they want it at a good cost. So the CTX, the X is just sort of
like a wild card, huh?
Yeah, like a wild card that either means quality, delivery, or cost.
Okay.
Hope that helps.
Right. Yep, absolutely. And reflecting back on the question you had earlier for us, Jim, about asking, which organizations currently use Lean or Six Sigma, I just wanted to pause here for a moment, because we did have quite a few people report that they are using this method. So I think there's some folks that may have some best practices that they can share with us. And also there, believe it or not, there's a few out there too who think that there's some areas for improvement. So I don't know if maybe a few people could share some of the things, that they find as a challenge working through this, maybe the DMAIC process too. Typically, what have Jim, and as people are starting to respond, maybe you can give just an example of what you find as maybe one of the biggest stumbling blocks for people.
Yeah, in one of the keys to success, and I think one of the ones that I would highlight is probably being one of the biggest keys to success is your deployment strategy. And what I mean by deployment is how are you going to identify projects? Um, what are you going to concentrate on? Who are you going to get certified? And we're going to be talking about these different certification levels. Um, Not everybody needs to be a black belt in an organization. In fact, the ratio is typically to have one black belt for every 20 to 30 green belts. So not everybody needs to be a black belt, but there'll be some people that you'll want to go on and become more proficient, and that's the difference in these different belts. So I think a lot of companies, and I've seen some very successful companies, and I've seen other companies that struggle. One of the big things also is to make sure that it's top driven. This is not a bottom up process. This is an organization and improvement process. And for it to be organization wide, it needs to come from the top. And we're going to be talking about some of the characteristics that, there's a lot of dedication that's required. How you execute and being disciplined in this process. It's not something that, a lean process is not something that you do part-time. It's something that you do every day. So I think those are some of the biggest hurdles that I've seen is where companies don't utilize the whole process the way it's intended to be utilized, and driving improvements and reducing cost in your operation.
Mhm. That's wonderful. Good points there. And maybe too, you can help us to have another person asking, really how can that be applied or really used in, say, for example, the human resources area of a company?
Yeah, does anybody on the line want to share with us where maybe they've had a success that they want to share?
Perfect.
If you want to open up your mic and
Yeah.
everybody.
I'll go ahead and I'll be looking through the chats. So while we're waiting for those to come in, it is a challenge in, say, for example, like a shared services area, such as the human resources department and everything, to implement this kind of DMAIC process, this process improvement. But was curious if you had any examples of that or
I can
maybe
I can
suggestions.
I can give you an example of one that I did that I was involved with at Delphi Packard that Jerry, um, that I retired from, and it was in the FMLA process, the Family Medical Leave process. The nurse that was in charge of that process was probably spending in a neighborhood of at least 60% of her day administering that process. And really what it came down to is when we started to analyze where some of the issues were, is that the doctors were not filling out the forms correctly, and therefore the person that was trying to get FMLA had to reinitiate the paperwork several different times. And so what we ended up basically doing is putting together an instruction sheet for the doctors and the nurses, and telling the the prospective person that was applying that when they left the doctor's office, to make sure these forms were filled out, at least in these different fields that were required. And by doing that, and by doing some things with just how we communicated FMLA, it reduced this person's time from 60% down to about 20% of her time. And so there was quite a bit of savings involved. And there's other onboarding is another issue with HR services, and onboarding new employees. Do we have everything that that employee needs the day that they start? Do they have their telephone? Do they have their computer? Do they have their password? Do they have all these different things that they need the day that they start, the telephone and so on? So there's, again, it's all about reducing variation, making processes and products and services more consistent.
No, that's really great. So I think, it's important for people to really look at this. I know obviously it started out in manufacturing, but I know you've and we've worked together with you, Jim, on a number of different organizations at those service industries. So anytime you have a process involved, that's what you're really focusing on. It doesn't have to actually produce a tangible product.
Absolutely, right. I mean, it's products and services.
So we have another guest who really implemented this process improvement around sales commissions, and they're saying they had mostly to add some checks and balances into reducing errors. Wow, what a great! I'm sure that was a true cost savings for the organization.
Absolutely. Very nice.
Excellent. It's a great example of a best practice. And so they wound up taking less than 1 month to get that new process up and running, and saved a lot of concerns besides saving money. So that's a great example.
I've got another question I'm going to ask the people on the on the on the thing here. That What are the in your deployment of Lean Six Sigma? I think most of you responded that you have started to use Lean Six Sigma in your organizations. How would you rate your deployment effort on a scale from 1 to 5? 5 being it went extremely well, to 1, we're hardly seeing any results at all. So if you wouldn't mind, in the chat, give us a number from 1 to 5, 5 being the best and 1 being the worst, of how you think your deployment is going. I see some people with a 4.
Right.
Yeah. So continue to let us know how your deployments went. Okay, we want to go to the next slide. All right, if we combine Lean, and when we combine Lean and Six Sigma together, we get a very powerful tool set. These tools are, for the most part, at least at the yellow belt and green belt level, are not that complex. In fact, they're almost common sense. And when we can combine these, we're going to get a lot of different benefits. They're going to get more consistent and efficient processes. Our products and services are going to be higher quality, more timely. We're going to improve customer value, the things that our customers are willing to pay for. And we're going to have higher customer satisfaction. And hopefully, by being more efficient, reducing waste, we're going to lower our cost for these products and services. So what I want to talk a little bit about are the different levels of certification. And as I mentioned earlier, there are basically 4 different levels. The yellow belt is a 2-day class that we have at corporate college that basically covers some of the basic tools, really gets into Tim Woods and understanding the different forms of waste, and then also understanding the sources of variation. And it's sort of the introductory for people getting into Lean Six Sigma. The next phase or the next certification level is the green belt level. The green belt level gets a little bit more into, slightly into statistics. And I know most of the people's, people are afraid of statistics, but we use statistics in order to take our raw data and turn it into information. So that's one of the main things that we look at. We actually give them software to use. We use a tool called QI Macros, which is a very nice statistical package that helps with the basic statistics. So that's the green belt level, and green belts are able then to lead small projects. And they may be involved in black belt projects, but basically green belts, small scope projects. After the green belt level, the next level is the black belt. And black belt really gets into statistical analysis. That's just about the difference in the different levels is the level of analysis. Green belt, hardly any analysis at all at the yellow belt level. The green belt, slightly more, but then at the black belt level, there's a lot of statistical analysis. This is where we get into things like analysis of variance and regression, and design of experiments, and some of the more statistical tools in nature. And then a master black belt, and I was fortunate enough to go through this process and become a master black belt. This is where you become the teacher. And a black belt is able to handle much larger scope projects than a green belt. But a master black belt is then a person then could actually lead a program. Green belts are not full-time. Yellow belts for sure are not full-time. Some black belts in some organizations are full-time. But in most cases, master black belts will be a full-time position. So I hope that helps from the standpoint of understanding the different levels. Jerry, if you want to go to the next slide.
Sure. And as I'm transitioning, one person brought up a great question to ask about the yellow belt. Would that be beneficial to a service business, say a professional services business?
Absolutely. Anytime you have waste and inconsistency in your products or services, these are great opportunities then to learn some of these basic tools and make huge improvements in those in your organization. So here's some keys to success. And as I said earlier, focusing on the deployment in the infrastructure. How are you going to select projects? Who are you going to select to lead these projects? Using a project charter, making sure that you have a project champion and sponsor for each of the projects that you have. All of that is very important. And it's probably more important than what kind of tools you're going to use. Most everybody is focusing on tools, and it should be more on the deployment in the infrastructure. To be successful, keep your project scoped properly. And what I mean by that is scope them as small as possible. There are many cases you can't solve world hunger. So what you need to try to do is to scope a project so that it's proper, that it can be solved, and that's what we concentrate on in the yellow belt and green belt level. Another thing is make people accountable. When they go through this process, they'll have the tools and techniques to make improvements. Let them go ahead and make those improvements, make them accountable for the results. And that's why you have project champions and sponsors, so that they interact with the team and the leaders of these teams to be able to understand what's going to happen. And it's not a carte blanche, they just do what they want, but in coordination with the sponsor and champion. The other thing that I don't have on there that I think is important is get as many people as you can involved. Everybody has an idea on how to make their job better, make it easier. Everybody works hard. Uh, we want to work smarter, not harder. So what it takes, I think it takes daily execution. You got to be doing this stuff. It's something, once you start down this path, that you want to continue, that you're going to see some huge benefits from. I asked one company that was doing very well. They've been doing this for about 3 to 4 years. And I asked them, I said, why do you think you're successful? One guy spoke up and he said, grit every day. He says, there was a 2-shift operation. And he said, if somebody doesn't understand something on the second shift, he said, I spent a lot of afternoons and early evenings on second shifts just trying to make sure people understand the process. Being disciplined, and then being dedicated. And that's the top management. How do I go about getting my yellow belt? Well, you can call corporate college, and you can speak to Ashley Speaker. She is the young lady up there that is for open enrollment if you want to go ahead and become a yellow belt or a green belt or any of those, the belts that I talked about. Okay, I think the last question I have for folks is, if your organization is not doing Lean or Six Sigma right now, are you considering a Lean Six Sigma program in the near future? And if you can, let us know, what time frame that you're thinking about doing that.
Great, Jim. And as people are starting to respond to that, there was a couple other questions that have come in about, and I thought they were really important. One was, how do you get the frontline team members to want to get really involved and provide Kaizen suggestions?
Um, Again, I think this that introduction to none of these, a lot of the waste. You can have a 2-hour meeting, and in fact, I did this at one of the smaller companies that we dealt with here within the last year. They had um, they had about 60 employees, and we brought like 20 into a room, and we covered the 8 waste and the 6 M's with them, and then had them actually go out and do what's called a Gimbal Walk. Gemba is where they actually go to the workplace and see for themselves some of the waste that they just learned about in this meeting. And they would come back then and talk about, what they saw and what they might do to make that better. Again, get as many people as you can involved in the process, because everybody has ideas on how to make their job better. Hope that helps.
Yep, absolutely. That absolutely does help. And we have a number of people who are on the webinar right now who are personally interested, but maybe they don't see that interest really being a priority for the organization right now. And I know you said a lot of this is top down driven, but you can still make those improvements locally, within your department too. And
Exactly.
I've found, it's like catches like fire, people start seeing what you're doing and then they want to start doing it too, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I did some work in one company, and we did some work at this one operator's work area. The next day, there were 3 or 4 other people, operators came up to me and said, "Hey, we want you over in our area next." So it's contagious.
Mhm.
Once you start doing things to make people's jobs easier, it's
Mhm.
very contagious and it moves very quickly.
Right. And we have a number of people both on the like the implementation side and then also on the learning, so training side, asking, how can they do this, complete this training virtually. So I know we have a number of these programs available virtually, correct?
Yeah, we're in the process right
Mhm.
now of we're doing some greenbelt training virtually. We try to keep the sessions to about 4 hours um, because it's a little tougher to do rather than in person.
Right.
Have a lot of different activities and exercises that we have them do. We can break up the class into different work areas, a workspace. We can put them into teams, and each one then can go to their own workout room and work on a project, and then come back and present it to the rest of the participants. So it's worked out pretty well. Like I said, we try to keep it to about 4 hours, so to make sure that we keep people engaged.
Right.
Doing that at the green
Absolutely.
belt level, the yellow belt level, and we've got also a black belt session that we're going to be starting here in a couple of weeks that we're going to be doing virtual.
Perfect, perfect. Here's another example of someone on the line who said, just their small group came together, completed a project, and whereas the entire organization could benefit, and they really caught their attention. The organization is now showing more interest, and there's obviously this team is still working very hard on deployment, but they are gathering a lot of momentum, and that's so encouraging to hear.
Yeah, exactly. It gets, like I said, it's contagious. And once people see it in one area, it doesn't take long for another area to say, hey, we want to do the same thing here because we've got some opportunity also.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah, it definitely starts to get everybody's attention. Well, anytime leaders can see you improving processes, creating greater value and satisfaction for your customers and saving money, that's like the triple net win.
It's a win-win.
Right, right. Great. And I see a couple more questions coming in. Um, So what is the time frame of getting the other belts? So I know, Jim, you were talking about the progression and everything. This person said, that there was like a 2-day training, but really wanted to know a little bit better kind of what the time frame is. And I know when you're talking about a 2-day, and I had the benefit of being in one of your yellow belt classes. And so we did meet a few times in person, but a lot of it was also online, self-paced. So it was a really nice blended approach. So, but now that we've moved to more all virtual, can you just give them a better sense of that time frame?
Yeah, in our yellow belt, it's a 2 day in person. Being virtual now, that would be four 4 hour sessions. Plus, there's modules that you do online at your own pace. So, and in the yellow belt, we do not require a project. So you
Hmm.
just come for the training, do the modules, online modules, and you would become certified as a yellow belt. The green belt, uh, in addition to the 2 days that you have as a yellow belt, a green belt then requires 3 additional um, in-person days. And
Right.
like I said, then, if you were going to use 4 hour sessions instead of having three, you would have 6 sessions. There are some additional modules. And in addition to the modules in the virtual training, there was also a project required. And this project can be done at your facility. In some cases, we've had people that were not employed. And as I said, the one person reached out to his church and was able to do a project there. Um, and we've had even people do, simple projects at home that was adequate for a greenbelt project.
Right. Right.
Yeah. The the black belt, the criteria for a black belt is to have your green belt. And in addition to the green belt, then you would have 6 additional days um, of lecture. And there's a few more modules. Like I said, this is where it gets a little more statistical intensive. So you're going to be learning some advanced statistical tools like analysis of variance, regression, design of experiments,
Mhm.
hypothesis testing, and so on.
Perfect.
Here,
I think, Jim, I think you have a lot of people who want to sign up for your classes. And one of the other questions coming in is that a number of people have is, but, by taking these classes, a lot of the earning those a certificate or a belt, they're hearing you talk about the belt. Is that earned once you complete the course, or do you have to take a special exam for that?
well, we provide a certification through corporate college, and that certification is uh, one of the best uh, in the U.S. If you want to get worldwide recognition, there is a certification that you can go through American Society for Quality, ASQ, and they also do a certification. It's a worldwide certification, and I can tell you that you going through the corporate college courses, it will um, it will prepare you to take that ASQ exam.
Perfect. That's very, very important. I think you know, we've always prided ourselves on the curriculum, and then, obviously pairing that with your expertise, Jim, in all these areas, and being able to provide those really tangible examples. I'll never forget how you shared those examples with us in the class that I attended, and we still also did have a lot of fun working with the Statipult too, measuring and understanding the variances and what that did uh, you know, to measure the standard deviation.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Great.
yeah, it's and I think everybody knows it's hard to when you're if you're looking for a job, most jobs this day and age are looking for people that have these skills, green belt, black
Yes.
belt, and so on. So uh, very hard to find an application or a request for a job that doesn't have these skills required or looking for people that have these skills.
Great. Yep. Absolutely. So, with that, Jim, I wanted to be respectful of everyone's time here. This has been such a phenomenal session. It always is with you, Jim. You're fantastic. I will say, because there was a number of people asking about various different ways to maybe enroll in a course. Obviously very interested in accomplishing this virtually, looking at pricing and everything and so forth. I would just say, right now, we will be sending out some information, and our team will be contacting you directly to provide you more detailed information about that. And that this session is being recorded. So we're very excited about that. And it will be up and available for everyone to view and rewatch and even share. Probably, I would imagine, by the early part of next week, say Monday or early Tuesday. So with that, I just wanted to speak on behalf of everyone here at Corporate College, all these amazing attendees who are here today, to say thank you, Jim, for taking your time and sharing this really great power lesson, as I call it. So,
Well, that's been
yeah.
my pleasure.
Great, great. Thank you. And just to everyone listening today, thank you so much for attending. We really want you to remember that Corporate College is here to serve you with these real essential learning tools. We want you to be able to overcome the challenges that you may be facing right now, and to accommodate the environment we're all working in. We offer our programs virtually, both in a virtual classroom, so you're still having that live interaction with the instructor, and we also have the more traditional self-paced online programs as well too. And as you can see, our subject matter experts really are incredible, and together with corporate college, we can really provide that organizational consultation services, training services, and coaching too. So when you have a moment, we would really like you to visit the Corporate College website so you can find our learnings and all the different programs and virtual classes that are available to you. We've offered them in a range of different programs, from our Frontline Leadership Certificate Program, obviously the Lean Six Sigma that Jim spoke about today, and even in through our patient access specialists and healthcare programs. And then if you have larger teams or you have some groups, please feel free to give me or anybody on our team at Corporate College a call, and we'll definitely arrange a tailored session for your team. Again, just to repeat it, feel free to rewatch this wonderful presentation today, even share it with your colleagues just by visiting the Corporate College free webinar series page in the next few days and by clicking on the free webinar series link. But you can always stay up to date with us by following us on social media. So thank you again for joining us today, and continue to stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.